Steve Austin, astronaut. A man barely alive. Gentlemen, we can rebuild him.
He was the $6 million man, unstoppable, admired, and living the dream. She was the most iconic woman on television, with a smile that lit up every room. Together, they looked like the perfect Hollywood power couple. But the truth was nothing like the glossy magazine covers. Behind closed doors, their story spiraled into heartbreak, betrayal, and a silence that lasted for decades. Lee Majors never forgave her. And once you hear what really happened, you will understand exactly why. Long before their names were etched into the fabric of American pop culture, Lee Majors and Farrah Fawcett were just two bright-eyed actors trying to make a name for themselves in a business that was equal parts glamorous and unforgiving. Lee had already begun carving out his path. Born Harvey Lee Yeary in Michigan and raised in Kentucky, he had the rugged good looks and quiet confidence that casting directors loved. He got his first real break in the Big Valley, starring alongside Barbara Stanwyck, and quickly earned a reputation as a serious actor with undeniable screen presence. Farrah, on the other hand, was a Southern beauty queen from Texas. With a magnetic smile and a camera-ready charm, she moved to Los Angeles to pursue modeling, quickly catching the eye of photographers, agents, and producers. Her look was iconic even before anyone knew her name. Sun-kissed hair, a gleam in her eyes, and that rare ability to seem both glamorous and approachable at the same time. They met in the late 1960s, introduced by friends at a party, and according to those who were there, the chemistry was instant. Lee was already a television star, and Farrah was just getting started. But the connection was more than just superficial. Lee was quiet, reserved, and loyal. Farrah was vibrant, funny, and full of energy. He grounded her. She inspired him. It was the kind of pairing that felt meant to be. They married in 1973, and for a while, it truly looked like a Hollywood dream. Lee had just landed what would become the role of a lifetime, Colonel Steve Austin in The $6 Million Man. The show was a phenomenon, drawing millions of viewers each week and turning Lee into a full-blown star. His face was on action figures, lunchboxes, and posters across America. Meanwhile, Farrah's modeling career began to soar. She appeared in shampoo commercials, magazine spreads, and gradually started landing acting roles. Her big break was right around the corner, and Lee was thrilled to see her succeed. In interviews at the time, he praised her beauty and talent, calling her the love of his life. To the outside world, they were golden. Red carpet events, celebrity parties, magazine covers, they looked like the perfect match. But what the public did not see were the cracks forming just beneath the surface. Their schedules rarely aligned. Lee was working grueling hours on his television set. Farrah was auditioning, networking, and building a career of her own. The very fame they had worked so hard to achieve was slowly pulling them apart. Still, Lee tried to hold on. He believed in their marriage. He believed in her. But fame has a way of changing people, not always for the worse, but sometimes in ways that make them unrecognizable to the person who once knew them best. And as Farrah's star prepared to rise higher than anyone expected, their picture-perfect marriage was about to face pressures no one on the outside could possibly imagine. Farrah Fawcett did not just rise to fame. She rocketed into a level of stardom very few ever reach. When she joined the cast of Charlie's Angels in 1976, everything changed overnight. The show was an instant cultural hit, but Farrah became something more than just another television actress. She became the face of the era, a symbol of glamour, independence, and effortless beauty. The poster that launched 1,000 teenage crushes. Farrah, in that red one-piece swimsuit, smiling with wind-blown hair, sold over 12 million copies. That image became one of the most iconic visuals of the 20th century. Suddenly, she was everywhere. Talk shows, magazine covers, billboards, product endorsements. Farrah was not just popular, she was inescapable. And while millions adored her, the rapid rise of her fame placed an enormous strain on the marriage that was already showing signs of wear. Farrah was now being pulled in 100 directions, producers offering roles, brands chasing her for endorsements, stylists and publicists filling her calendar. Her time became a luxury. and her husband, Lee Majors, often found himself waiting on the sidelines. Lee, who had become a household name thanks to the $6 Million Man, was used to long hours on set and the sacrifices required by television stardom. But even he was not prepared for the whirlwind that Farrah's fame brought into their home. The woman he had married, sweet, grounded, and close to her Texas roots, was becoming something else entirely. Not colder, not unkind, just distant, consumed by the machine of celebrity. There are stories, now confirmed by multiple sources, that Lee asked her show's producers to adjust her filming schedule so they could have dinner together a few nights a week. It was a simple request, a husband wanting time with his wife. But Farrah reportedly declined. She did not want to be seen as dependent on her husband's wishes. She was determined to stand on her own, and that fierce independence, while admirable, only widened the emotional gap between them. Lee later said in an interview that during the height of her success, he sometimes saw Farrah only 2 days a week, and those days were not always quality time, just fragments of a once close bond, reduced to calendar slots between photo shoots and promotional events. He felt the distance growing, and no amount of love or patience seemed to slow it down. What hurt the most was not the fame itself, but what it represented. Farrah's rise meant more than just public adoration. It meant a shift in values, priorities, and connection. The woman who once leaned on him for support was now carrying an empire on her own shoulders. And somewhere along the way, they stopped speaking the same emotional language. Lee had always believed in traditional values. He was raised to think of marriage as a lifelong bond, something sacred. But Farrah was rewriting her identity in front of the entire world, and there was no room for slowing down. She was not trying to hurt him, but sometimes success has collateral damage, and their relationship became one of its first casualties. And just when things seemed like they could not become more strained, something happened that would break whatever was left, and it played out in front of the entire world. By the late 1970s, the emotional gap between Lee Majors and Farrah Fawcett had become impossible to ignore. The love that had once brought them together had been buried under fame, career demands, and long stretches of absence. They were still married in name, but in practice, they were living separate lives. Two stars, orbiting different galaxies. Farrah's schedule was packed with television shoots, appearances, and branding deals. Lee was still filming The $6 Million Man, carrying the weight of his own career while watching his personal life slip away. He reportedly tried, again and again, to salvage what remained, reaching out, making time, even asking friends to step in and help them reconnect. But Farrah, perhaps unconsciously, had already begun to move on. The final blow came in the form of another man, and not just any man. Ryan O'Neal was not a stranger to Lee. He was a fellow actor, a peer, and at one time, a trusted friend. They had both been prominent names in the industry, and their paths had crossed many times. So when Lee saw tabloid photos of Ryan and Farrah together, holding hands, smiling at events, the pain was immediate and personal. Farrah and Ryan's affair made headlines, and it was not subtle. She was still legally married to Lee when their relationship became public knowledge. It was everywhere. Magazine spreads, late-night television jokes, endless speculation. To the outside world, it was a juicy Hollywood scandal. But to Lee, it was something else entirely. A betrayal that cut deeper than anything he had ever experienced. Friends of Lee say he was blindsided. He did not get a phone call. He did not get a warning. He found out with the rest of America, through glossy photos and sensationalized headlines. And the man she was with, someone he had welcomed into his life. That part, perhaps more than anything, made it unforgivable. Some insiders have even speculated that Farrah's relationship with Ryan may have begun while she and Lee were still attempting to repair their marriage, though the timeline remains unclear. What is clear is that Lee felt humiliated, not just hurt as a husband, but betrayed as a man who had built a life with someone who now seemed to be rewriting their story with someone else. Farrah, for her part, never denied the relationship. She and Ryan were soon seen everywhere together, and the press quickly painted them as the new Hollywood couple. But there was always an undertone of awkwardness, an unspoken understanding that something sacred had been broken in the process. Lee never spoke publicly about it. He never named names. He never lashed out, but his silence was deafening. He withdrew. He stopped attending events with her. He stopped giving interviews that touched on personal matters. And eventually, he stopped talking about Farrah at all. To the world, it looked like he had moved on. But those closest to him knew better. He had not just lost a wife. He had lost his trust, his privacy, and his belief in what their relationship had meant. And with Ryan O'Neal's face now tied forever to the end of his marriage, forgiveness was no longer on the table. And yet, rather than confront the chaos, Lee Majors did something few expected. He disappeared from her world completely. After the dust settled and the headlines lost their shock value, Lee Majors did something deeply un-Hollywood. He stayed silent. In a town where everyone seems to eventually tell their side of the story, he never gave in. No interviews, no memoir confessions, no subtle jabs in the press, just silence. By the time the divorce was finalized in 1982, nearly 9 years after their wedding, Lee had already stepped away emotionally. He immersed himself in work, taking on roles in television movies and series that kept him busy, but never quite recaptured the fire of his $6 million man days. He appeared in The Fall Guy, a show that ran for several seasons and kept his name relevant. But behind the scenes, friends say he was never truly the same. Farrah, on the other hand, leaned into the spotlight. Her relationship with Ryan O'Neal continued, rocky though it was. They broke up, they reconciled, they argued, they laughed, and all of it played out in the pages of tabloids. It was as if her entire emotional life had become public domain, a sharp contrast to the man she had left behind. What struck people most was Lee's complete absence from her narrative. When Charlie's Angels had reunions, he was not there. When she made public appearances, he was never seen nearby. It was not avoidance out of bitterness. It felt more like a man protecting himself from reopening old wounds. In rare moments when interviewers dared bring up Farrah's name, Lee would usually give a polite answer and move on. He once said in passing that he did not watch Charlie's Angels when it aired. The reason? It was just too painful, he said. Seeing her on screen, larger than life, while knowing how much had been lost, it was more than he could handle. And perhaps the most telling sign of all was that Lee never tried to set the record straight. He never blamed Farrah, never trashed Ryan, never played the victim. Instead, he chose to disappear from the story entirely. It was as if, once she had left, he decided his only form of control was to vanish from her public world. Privately, friends said the wound remained. He dated, yes, but no one seemed to fill the space Farrah had occupied. For nearly 2 decades, he stayed unmarried, focusing on work and keeping his personal life under the radar. He was often described as kind but distant, still charming, but with a guardedness that had not been there before. Farrah, meanwhile, was still Farrah, beloved, bold, and constantly in the headlines, though not always for the right reasons. Her career had ups and downs, and her relationship with Ryan was anything but smooth. But she remained a public figure, one who wore her emotional scars out loud. The contrast between them was stark. She shared her life with the world, no matter how messy. He closed the door and threw away the key. And while it seemed like their stories had split for good, something unexpected happened years later. An opportunity arose, quiet, personal, and off the record, that could have changed everything between them. But what Lee did next only confirmed what many had long suspected. Some heartbreaks never fully fade, and some silences are louder than words. Years passed, the media moved on, and so did the careers of both Lee Majors and Farrah Fawcett. But behind the scenes, something unexpected almost happened. A private reunion that could have rewritten their story. It was the early 2000s, and Farrah had entered a quieter phase of her life. Her relationship with Ryan O'Neal had cooled, and she was focusing more on her artwork, charity work, and small acting projects. Lee, too, had mellowed with time. He was no longer the intense action star of the 1970s, but a respected actor with decades of experience behind him. That was when a mutual friend reportedly approached them both, separately, about the possibility of reconnecting. According to sources close to the couple, the proposal was simple. Not a public spectacle, not a reunion for cameras, but just a quiet meeting, a chance to talk, perhaps even laugh. and finally clear the air after so many years of silence. At first, it seemed like both parties were open to the idea. Farrah, it was said, had softened toward the idea of seeing Lee again. She had once loved him deeply, and time had mellowed many of the old emotions. Lee, for his part, was more hesitant. He listened. He thought about it. He even admitted, privately, that part of him missed the person she used to be. But then, he said no. He was not angry. He was not bitter. He just did not want to go back. Too much had happened. Too much time had passed. And some wounds, especially the ones left unspoken, never truly heal. His silence all those years had not just been about dignity. It had been about protection. Seeing her again, even for a moment, meant reopening a chapter he had worked hard to close. Not long after, Farrah was diagnosed with cancer. Her condition worsened rapidly, and any possibility of reunion faded. Lee never visited. He never reached out publicly. To some, it seemed cold, but to others, it was heartbreak in its quietest form, the kind that never finds the right words. The truth is, Lee Majors had already said goodbye. Long before the world knew Farrah was sick, he had already let her go. But deep down, that door had never really closed, and what happened next made that heartbreak final. In 2006, the world was stunned to learn that Farrah Fawcett had been diagnosed with a rare and aggressive form of cancer. She faced her battle with immense courage, choosing to document her experience in a raw, deeply personal video diary that would later air as a documentary. It was her final act of public vulnerability, stripped of glamour, unfiltered by fame. Millions watched, many cried, and even more admired the strength she showed in the face of devastating odds. But one person remained noticeably silent through it all: Lee Majors. While tributes poured in and the press revisited her legacy, Lee stayed out of the conversation. He did not comment. He did not appear. He did not attend her public events or private fundraisers. It was not because he did not care, quite the opposite. According to those close to him, Lee was aware of Farrah's condition from the very beginning, and it deeply affected him. Friends say he followed her health updates quietly, choosing to grieve from a distance. There was no animosity left, just sorrow. But Lee had made peace with the idea that their chapter had ended long ago. Re-entering that space, even as a gesture of comfort, was something he just could not bring himself to do. Whether it was fear, guilt, or self-preservation, no one can say for sure. But he stayed away. When Farrah passed away in June of 2009, Lee released a single, carefully worded statement. She fought a tremendous battle against a terrible disease. She was an angel on earth, and now she is an angel forever. It was brief, polite, respectful, but missing the warmth that once defined their love story. He did not attend her funeral. Some say he could not face it. Others believe he had already mourned her long before she was gone. The truth may be somewhere in between. What is clear is that Lee Majors, the man who once would have done anything for Farrah, chose instead to remember her from afar. But even in that distance, his silence spoke volumes, and many believe he carried quiet regret until the very end. Time has a way of rewriting stories. Today, when people remember Lee Majors and Farrah Fawcett, it is often through the lens of nostalgia, a beautiful couple from a golden era, caught in the spotlight of fame and youth. Their photos still circulate online, framed in vintage filters, smiling at red carpet events as if nothing ever went wrong. But those who followed their journey know the truth was far more complicated. Lee Majors eventually moved on. In 2002, he married again, this time to a woman far outside the Hollywood scene. It was a quieter, more stable chapter, and by all accounts, one that brought him peace. But even with a new life, the shadow of Farrah never fully disappeared. She had been his first great love and his greatest heartbreak. Farrah, too, left behind a powerful legacy. Despite the chaos of her personal life, she fought hard to be taken seriously as an actress, earning critical acclaim for dramatic roles later in her career. And in her final years, she became a symbol of courage, facing her illness with honesty and grace. But what remained unfinished was the story between them. There was no final conversation, no public reconciliation, no moment of peace between the two people who had once been everything to each other. And for fans, that mystery lingers. Did Lee ever truly forgive her? Did she ever want him to? The answer, perhaps, lies in the silence that followed her passing and the years that came before it. Lee never attacked her publicly. He never capitalized on their story, never tried to reclaim his side of the narrative. Instead, he held on to what was left quietly, in private, where no camera could follow, because in the end, the woman Lee Majors never forgave might also have been the woman he never stopped loving.